Join us on another exciting adventure of Exodus.
So a lot of people have been looking into ionic lifters, and I hope you have been too, because we've been making some videos talking about the importance of ionic breeze. And if I haven't spelled it out enough, please check it out and look into this just a bit more. Because there's a lot of people that are working on different designs for ionic lifters, and they're going to become a big part of our reality in the next few months.
Icosahedral tricycle biplane.
I'm just going to say it. Pretty sure the part that's worth noting is that I was allowed to wander around Ames Research Center with no escort. In fact, in school, I had to design my own ionic lifter, and there's software for this, and I'll put some links down to some pretty impressive physics engineers who've made their own versions of solar-powered ionic lifters that work in certain kinds of software that test aerodynamics in flight. But ionic gliders and simulators have been going on probably more like decades. Yet only recently have these ionic breeze propulsion systems started to figure out how this actually have to work, and why I'm talking so much about ionized nanoparticles being used in geoengineering, as well as the electromagnetic fields that are used to propel these crafts. Even crafts you might think aren't using this technology. I mean, you have to wonder how many of these ships that Lockheed has made rely on technology that doesn't look like the technology it's masked with, so others would just assume it's just a regular plane, even if it looks like a giant turkey. I mean, part of the fun thing at Lockheed is to make things that look like they shouldn't be able to fly. Anyway, it looks like this technology is out there, so we might as well talk about it. It's dangerous though. It's dangerous in the wrong hands. You really want to know what it is? Okay, I'll tell you. Get ready for the way the metaphor works in this scenario. The space which they traverse is referred to as the square. The square is governed by the all-powerful force which they demand exists, referred to as the gravity. This is the architecture of the matrices which exist between the two pillars of Joachim and Boaz. This field, this square, this electromagnetic space, an inner and exo energy, an inner and exo matter, a quantum metaphysics metric that's been understood for some time as holographic energy. This holographic energy, which exists between the two poles, has the power to govern and be governed. These frequencies are studied in several different schools. Between Joachim and Boaz, there is the left-hand path and the right-hand path, or the study of the light and the dark sun. This principle, which is so esoteric that it's been dismissed as gravity. Publications, such as the ones available at IEEE.spectrum.com, reveal more specific definitions, such as that of magnetic wind, or nanoscopic ionized aerogels, substances equally as, almost as, or sometimes more light than air, easily directable with magnetic currents. And this magnetic breeze is used to direct a voltage of 20,000 to negative 20,000 volts, give or take, depending. However, this isn't a very recent experiment, which seems to be functioning just fine, so I'm using it as an example, because this is probably going to be the new kind of plane that you're seeing all the time. These will be planes that use 1% of the energy and last 20 years at a time, will never need to be refueled, and rely on the principles of this magnetic breeze from the polarity of solid state flight. I mean, get ready to be wooed by the state-of-the-art physics of this new kind of airplane that looks nothing like the airplanes of today. And were you ready for it? Because it was a biplane. I don't know if this wrestles with your understanding of Antiguitech and futurism the way it did for me, but this is completely blowing my mind, even today, as I talk about it, and I've been thinking about this for months. I mean, the very fundamental future of flight is completely dependent on these aeroplanes that will last, that rely on not just 2 wings, but probably something that looks like 20, and look exactly like these old crazy kooky planes that we were told could never fly, and in fact were crazy that they ever did. And if anything, these were demonstrative prototypes just to show an experimental craft that could be created out of something better, greater, in a different way in the future. But really quickly, let's just look at the Wright brothers' blueprints. Here betwixt 2 Aleister Crowley and Order of the Golden Dawn bicurials, created by metal coils, a small motorcycle engine drives a propeller. These futuristic planes, which will provide us with the capacity for cleaner static flight, electromagnetic polarized biplanes, are starting out in the same way, completely demonstrative and prototypical. You can already tell so much from the original concept art, namely the materials. All of a sudden you start wondering about why these are the ways these are manufactured. Maybe there is something to it. I mean, why do they use wooden insulators on foam poles? Why do they work so well, even to this day? In fact, even even in microtechnology, many capacitors are made out of cardboard, so it behooves us to look just a little bit deeper into the natural material and why it was necessary to make these early flights. And also, the information we have about the oldest drawings of aviation, particularly the Mayan drawings and the Sumerian and Egyptian, which admittedly there are pictures of blimps, there are tons more pictures of actually jets. And one of the things that we strive for in our hypothesis to look for ancient Tartarian artifacts is the principle that humans are capable of great things. It seems ever more likely that we're capable of creating flying jet and propellered metal vehicles, and that rather than created by some sort of aliens who just took off, like LRH said, our civilizations have a more human origin story that's more Tartarian. And the last video goes deeper into ionic breeze, and I recommended trying this at home. And similarly to the magnets in a train, you can train the ions to flow down the electromagnetic particles of the craft. And when you start looking at all sorts of crafts that exist today, particularly stealth crafts, it becomes, I hope, a bit more obvious that there's some more things going on than our traditional understanding of aerodynamics that are keeping these crafts in the sky. You see, this is one of the reasons why these are so expensive. The amount of energy that's necessary to keep the electricity in a plane airborne for days, weeks, months, or years at a time is non-trivial. However, that energy can be harnessed from the environment around us. This recently disclosed public solid-state technology, solid-state flight prototype, relies on the wires carrying the charge of 20,000 volts, which create the ions to positively charge the particles in the air. Between the biplane wings, the ions are attracted to the wire, which are collecting a negative 20,000 charge volt at the back of the plane. This thrusts the ions outside of the collector at a path of 200 miles per hour. This craft has a power of 40,000 volts, flies, and weighs only 5.4 pounds. Its inspiration? The Star Trek shuttle. Considering the amount of piezoelectricity and ubiquitous energy that are flowing, particularly from electromagnetic radio waves used to conduct satellite and aerial 5G technology, electromagnetic flight is almost certainly happening, but can easily explain some of the more interesting unidentified flying object sightings for the last 70 or 100 years. Perhaps centuries, and also explains why there's such a drive to produce these cellular towers can be extended all over the world, and other international states are working against it. For instance, in Japan, the new emperor of Japan has recently forbid 5G. The Japanese state has conducted studies on 5G and found that there is an increase in mental disorders and health problems, and so have decided to disrupt the flow and decided to ban 5G and wait for an alternative. However, assuming around the world that for the most part 5G goes without a hitch, which it seems like it already has, this technology will mean free flights, where these electromagnetic biplanes are able to soar, seemingly on the ubiquitous ethers of the electromagnetic energy that pulsates around us, and they'll be able to do it for days, weeks, months, and years even at a time. In fact, I would argue that they already have been doing this. And then all of a sudden it makes sense why there was such a drive to understand these flight machines at the beginning of the 20th century. These perhaps reverse engineered crafts, hundreds of millions of dollars invested in eccentric inventors in order to understand the finer mechanisms of these electromagnetic crafts, something that seemingly very few understood. But it starts to make more sense why they were so certain that this could work if it had already worked before, and that maybe most of these designs come from some sort of pre-existing Roswell. After all, we know that there were gliders like this even beyond blimps back during the Civil War now, and the designs just generally don't make sense, unless of course we are designing some sort of modern flying machine, one designed with a purpose completely different than to just catch the wind, one to actually harness the powers of electrostatic friction like a hummingbird. In a lot of ways, you can look at an electromagnetic field of electrostatic energy as the friction that's being caused by the subatomic particles vibrating in these string coils. Like flapping wings, they're just flapping faster than you can see. And from what we now know about NIMSA, Sonora Air Club, Del Shao, and the 18th century New England Fairfield County Weather Balloon Society, the key strapped to Benjamin Franklin's kite under the electric storm makes a bit more sense as metaphor, but also clues to some sort of symbolic truth. Some of the channels have shown that beyond weather balloons there have been gliders over the centuries, and that Tartaria certainly had aerial-borne crafts, certain routes which would have been impossible to traverse without them, as well as drawings and hieroglyphs. Surveying have all but proven their evidence of their existence. And there's so much more that we're going to have to talk about in terms of ionic lifting and jet propulsion. I'm sure there's going to be more people that are going to want to say, hey, there's more to jets than you realize, and that flight has a lot less less to do with ions than you want to admit. But that's the interesting thing about history, because somehow we all have imaginations. History serves as some sort of a collective consciousness, sort of like the imaginative realm of quantum physics and metaphysics science, as a tangible place that can exist in the minds of many people at once to make it possible to share a collective consciousness. It's through that every person is bringing Tartaria to life, filling in the gaps and in a way coloring it, and realizing the truth about the ancient past. We're starting to find out how false the paradigm that's presented as our present is. In our rediscovery of the present, we're looking towards the future. And it's amazing the kind of things that are appearing all around us just because we're talking about these things. How much more is just talking about things going to change the world? It's as if just admitting it exists makes it appear. And that's all I really want to say for today, because there's going to be a lot more videos in the future, and this is already longer than I expected. I had to say it because I'm very interested to find out what you all think about it. Thanks a lot for watching. Subscribe to all the notifications and tune in soon.
Is this airing right now?
Recent talk.
This program is coming to you via Relay 2 satellite, a spacecraft orbiting the Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarian.
Exertus.